Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you're having an amazing day today. We have a tremendous stream coming up on this lovely Friday. We're going to be going to the Supreme Court. We've got 24 states that have now joined, submitted an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief to the United States Supreme Court. It's on a pretty big issue here. We've got the election coming up, and we've got registration deadlines coming up to be voting in the 2024 election. Of course, in Arizona, that deadline is on October 7th, so it's going to be the last day to register here. And we've got a big question about whether or not certain people called illegal aliens can register to vote and how that's being done. And so what has happened in Arizona is we put some limits on who can even register to get a ballot. You got to be a citizen. You got to prove that, or else you don't get a ballot. You don't get a federal form. And so the Ninth Circuit originally allowed that limitation to be in place. Then they reversed themselves. And so now Arizona was taking this up to the Supreme Court. 24 states have now joined in on that. And we're going to go through that amicus brief and see what is inside, because there is some good stuff. We do not want non-citizens voting in our elections. That's a privilege for citizens and citizens alone. So we'll be talking about that. There's also more. Alabama was having some difficulty with their registrations. Apparently, there were thousands of people on their registration lists that should not be on the list. And so they're now purging them off the rolls over there. And Alabama, voting rights groups are, how dare you do that? And so we'll go through those stories and see what they're reporting there. That's just Alabama. So if it's several thousand there, how many other thousands are in other states? And the margin of error is very small in these things. Remember that in Arizona, it was like 11,000 votes in 2020. So we're being very cautious about what is happening with the votes. Then we'll turn our attention over to Tim Walz, because Tim Walz, man, some of the media is now coming back out. Some people saying the honeymoon period is over. Others saying it wasn't really a honeymoon. We're talking about Kamala. It was more like a one-night stand. But I didn't make that one up. That was on X. So you can understand that we're all wondering when people are going to start listening to her and realizing who she is. And maybe reality will smack them in the face and they'll recognize, oh yeah, she's not very competent or capable at all. And they'll start to vote accordingly or change their opinions in the polls accordingly. And so now some of the media is coming out and they're ridiculing and actually shredding Tim Walz on his DUI, because he was lying about that too. And there's been a lot of pattern here of just lies and little white lies and little, fairy tales here and there. You start to add them up. This guy just feels like he's just a liar. So we'll go through it. James Comer also sent another letter over to somebody demanding to know about this guy's CCP connections. And we learned a little bit more about it. Apparently he's formed a company. James Comer has been pretty right about a lot of his foreign collusion. He was just vindicated. Remember, the government was trying to cover up for Hunter Biden for quite a while. Now they're throwing him over the bus because daddy president is not going to be protecting him anymore. And so we'll go through that. We'll see what James Comer is digging into when it comes to Tim Walz. And we got some good stuff happening as well. And so we've got a great stream plan. I'm glad that you're here. It's a beautiful, beautiful and amazing Friday. Hopefully your week was successful and outstanding. Before we get into any business on the day, we got to talk about the perilous times that we're living in. We've got attempted assassinations. We've got coups, cybersecurity threats. Everything is just heating up. We know that. We see it around us every day. Now, Forbes just put out an article saying that our government is giving $176 million to Moderna for the bird flu stuff, gearing up for the next pandemic. We've seen it before. We can't trust the establishment with our health, and so we must take matters into our own hands now. And so I've got my own contagion emergencies kit. Comes from the Wellness Company. You can get yours too. This kit is not a joke, as you can see. It's your frontline defense against whatever comes at us next. It's packed with all sorts of good stuff. Hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, Tamiflu, budesonide, nebulizer. You can rest easy knowing that you've got the meds on hand and a guidebook for safe use at home. Every American in this country needs at least one of these kits. And so now you can have yours. Get yours. Very easy. Less than the cost of a single doctor's visit. You can have these medications on hand. And so let's be proactive. Go to twc.health/Robert. Links are down in the description below. Grab your contagion emergency kit. If you go to the link in the description, twc.health/Robert, you'll save $30 off at checkout. And these kits are only available in the United States, and we can always be prepared. So thanks for checking them out, our friends at the Wellness Company. All right, so let's get into it, my friends. We've got business to attend to. Voter registrations are now becoming due. The clock is ticking until election 2024. The question is, who is getting those registrations completed? And are those ballots going out to illegal aliens or people who should not be actually voting in this election? The answer is yeah. Some people are actually registered who should not be registered. And so when we see this a lot from the left, they come out and say, oh, no, it's illegal for non-citizens to be voting. It's illegal for illegal aliens to be voting. And we say, well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Do you think they care about the law? Is that what you're implying? Because by virtue of the fact that they're here, they've already broken the law. Now, I know that they'll come back and respond, and, well, there's asylum because we gave them asylum for everything. But you get the point. We have a problem. Now, Alabama election officials make voter registrations inactive for thousands of potential non-citizens. It's 3,200 voters saying that they're on the rolls. They may not be citizens. So how did they get on the rolls if they're not citizens? Arizona's trying to clean it up, but let's see what's happening in Alabama. Thousands of registered voters in Alabama who've been previously identified as non-citizens by the feds will have their registration status changed to inactive, the Secretary of State announced. Then voter rights groups came out and blew a lid. The Secretary of State there, Wes Allen's shout out, announced on Tuesday 3,200 people will receive letters saying, well, you're not going to be voting. Because we cross-referenced the list of non-citizen identification numbers provided by Homeland with local voter registration numbers, Alabama has over 3 million registered voters. This is not a one-time review of our voter file. We're going to continue to conduct reviews on this to make sure everyone in our file is eligible. And we're going to continue to look at this. Fear that non-citizens are voting has become a cornerstone of Republican messaging. And oh gosh, here we go again. Despite there being no evidence of widespread voter fraud. Ugh. They're recycling that line again from 2020. And remember, the goalposts changed. They said, oh, there's no fraud. Step one. Oh, there's no widespread fraud. Step two. Oh, wait, actually, there is fraud and there is widespread fraud, but there's no widespread fraud that impacted the outcome of the election. Step three. And then we were like, well, yeah, there's like, tens of thousands of ballots. There are problems. Then they said, well, no court of law found that the outcome of the election was changed. You go, oh, gosh. Okay, great. So you changed like 4 times now. Thanks. So they're going to do it again. Now, prominent Democrats and voting rights activist groups across the country have pushed back against national legislation that would require proof of citizenship to register to vote, saying, no, we don't need that. We already have pre-existing legislation that makes it a federal crime to vote as a non-citizen. And so they put it on the forms. They put it on the form so that it's illegal. It's illegal to fill this form out and get a ballot. Obviously, they do it anyways, because we've got 3,200 people who are apparently on their rolls in Alabama. And were any of those people going to be prosecuted for federal crimes? Do you think Merrick Garland's DOJ is going to go through this list and start prosecuting people for illegally filling out a voter registration form in Alabama? No. 3,200 voters will be required, if they want to vote, to fill out a form at their local registrar's office and provide proof of citizenship. Now, the list provided to Alabama Secretary of State by Homeland includes people who have become naturalized citizens and are as such are legally eligible to vote. Allen said naturalized citizens will have the opportunity to update their lists. The Alabama initiative mirrors another initiative. In June, Tennessee election officials asked over 14,000 people to provide proof of their citizenship in order to remain on the active rolls. They later walked back that request, okay, because they got intimidated. They're like, we're going to sue you into oblivion if you dare ask for citizenship. Jonathan Diaz, the director of a voting advocacy and partnership, said, the announcement undermines public confidence in the integrity of the elections. Well, that's the point. There is no integrity if there's 14,000 non-citizens voting. What kind of, it's, he says it's like using a bazooka to kill a cockroach. What? You get this cockroach, you're going to cause a lot of collateral damage. In this case, collateral damage are eligible voters who are being flagged for removal. Just have to prove you're a citizen at some point. Now, here's what the local news says about this. from Alabama.
3,000 registered voters in Alabama just got booted from the state voter rolls. That's after the Secretary of State, Wes Allen, ordered the removal of all non-citizens who were registered. But how did non-citizens get registered in the first place? WAFF 48's Nick Ballinger spoke to the Secretary of State to get to the bottom of this story. Nick?
Yeah, Margot, when I asked Secretary Allen how these people got registered to vote in the first place, he couldn't give me a clear answer just yet, saying it was still being investigated. But when he gave me a breakdown of how many there were in each county, the numbers were glaring.
Yeah.
This is a list from Secretary of State Wes Allen of how many non-citizens were registered to vote in our counties. The state found 3,251 people. 742 of them were from North Alabama.
We got the information. We cross-checked it against our centralized data file here in the state of Alabama and found those 3,200 individuals.
The information he's talking about are people with alien registration numbers. Those are issued to immigrants who intend to live in this country permanently and have already applied for a green card. However, you're not eligible to vote with just an alien identification number. When I asked Allen how 3,000 plus were able to register in the first place, he couldn't give me the answer.
But it's our belief that only American citizens should be allowed to vote. Non-citizens, whether they're legal or illegal immigrants, cannot register to vote. It's a federal offense.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not a belief. Okay, it's the law. So thanks for enforcing the law. This guy's doing it. Others are not because they're so freaked out on doing it. Now, you can see this is obviously a big problem, and it's Alabama is willing to do something about it. Tennessee, it sounds like they got, pushed back on their heels or whatever by somebody, and this is a problem elsewhere. So what happened in Arizona is they were trying to limit non-citizens from being able to register. Okay, you just don't get to register. You don't get to come and use our facilities and register to vote unless you're a citizen. Now, the Democrats and Mi Familia Vota, they want you to be able to do that. You're a non-citizen? Well, just fill out the form and then we'll get a federal-only ballot. Now, the Republican National Committee from Arizona has taken this to the United States Supreme Court, as you can see, on emergency application for a stay. And the procedural history here is a little bit complicated, but in other words, Arizona is not right now allowed to put registration limitations that have already passed by our legislature, like the state has passed these rules. We're not allowed to put those into place for reasons. Now, here are 24 states that are joining in to say the Ninth Circuit was wrong. And let's watch how they explain this. Starting once we pass through the table of authorities and the table of contents, we can see well cited here. We begin with an introduction to the Supreme Court. 24 states say, all right, Supreme Court, listen. According to this case called Arizona versus United States in 2012 that came from you guys, you said, quote, the states bear many of the consequences of unlawful immigration. You wrote that. And for too long, federal policies of non-enforcement have left the states helpless before those evil effects. Yeah, that was Justice Scalia, rest in peace, concurring in part and dissenting in part in that prior case. So agreeing with part of the decision and disagreeing with others. Now, one of those effects is voter fraud. States have to deal with this because the federal government is useless. And voter fraud drives honest citizens out of the democratic process, and it breeds distrust of our government, from a 2006 per curiam opinion. Now, voting by non-citizens, they write, both legal and illegal, is real, all right? Recently, the Commonwealth of Virginia also discovered 6,300 non-citizen registered voters on its voter rolls. How's that happening? The typical rejoinder is to claim that, well, few non-citizens vote. It's just a few people. On its own terms, though, the answer at least acknowledges the problem exists. Yeah. But it also ignores that even small voting blocks can have outside effects on electoral outcomes. That effect is most obvious in local elections. But non-citizen voting also has national effects. Look at Al Franken, for example. He won his Senate seat in Minnesota in 2008 by 312 votes, an amount small enough that voting by aliens likely decided the election. Isn't that amazing? Non-citizens decided that. Great. Participation by 0.65% of non-citizens in Minnesota is sufficient to account for the entirety of Franken's margin. Our best guess is that nearly 10 times that many voted, according to this electoral study. And that same study is estimating that 1.2 million illegal aliens voted in 2008. 1.2 million! Ah, that's over 2 Wyomings voted in 2008. That number's got to just be, oh my gosh. While enough voted in North Carolina to provide reason to believe that they delivered the state's electoral votes to President Obama. Study comes from Jesse T. Richmond. Do non-citizens vote in U.S. elections? Question. 36 electoral study, 149, 2014 article. Looks like it might be a paper. Looks like a study. Yeah. So there is every reason to believe that this problem of non-citizen voting has gotten worse. That's why Kamala was inviting him in every day. Now, as the number of aliens in the United States has undeniably grown. Now, one study suggests that there were over 11 million illegals in this country in 2019, but now the southwest border, for example, is out of control. That figure is even higher. Over the last 3 fiscal years, encounters at the southwest border have risen from roughly 1.7 million to nearly 2.5 million. Thank you, Harris Biden, with over 1.8 million encounters to date in the fiscal year 2024. That comes from the Border Patrol numbers and Homeland's numbers, footnote 4, from cbp.gov. Big numbers increase. Why? Now, indeed, the problem has grown so bad that the governor of Texas has invoked the invasion clause. The number of lawfully present aliens has also grown. Indeed, every year since 2000, the United States has admitted approximately 1 million permanent resident aliens. And that's a footnote 5 from migrationpolicy.org. And that's the same thing that we saw earlier. Earlier this week, we read another headline and another story that they were accelerating the actual citizenship requests of other residents, right? So if you actually are a resident and they're like, oh, where are you? Where'd you come from? What country you come from? Okay. And what state are you in? Oh, Georgia. Great. So you're getting fast tracked. Perfect. Front of the line, you get a citizenship. And while you walk out of here with your new American flag, congratulations, here is a ballot. Make sure you vote Biden. Here you go. Right. And they just kind of fast passing them through like Disneyland. Now, each of those aliens represents another possible opening for voter fraud. For each represents a probability, no matter how small, that they will vote illegally, right? There is a it definitely happens. The question is how much, and if we're talking about small margins, Franken wins, Obama wins. Add to that other possible sources of non-citizen voting, like aliens here legally, but who cannot vote or who have overstayed their visas, and the magnitude of the problem becomes clear. And then you ask yourself, right, what if they're filling out forms and they just don't understand the distinction? Are you a U.S. citizen, yes or no? If you mark no, don't fill out this form. It's a felony. They say, well, I mean, I have legal residency, and so, maybe that's kind of the same thing. What's the difference here? I'm allowed to be here, and I'm a resident. I got my papers, so I'm just going to vote. Not understanding that there's a distinction between lawful permanent residency and citizenship, or whatever the justification is in someone's mind. In fact, it's often the case that lawfully present aliens register to vote when offered the opportunity at the time that they get a driver's license. Now here, as in every other facet of life, the law of averages applies and dictates that illegal aliens are illegally voting to some degree, obviously. Now the debate is simply about the scale of the problem. Arizona has been on the front lines of this invasion for decades. Tell me about it. I've been living here my whole life. As the court has acknowledged, and has so long tried to stop illegal aliens from voting forever. Arizona, like many states, including ours, requires as a qualification to be an elector that a voter be a citizen and registered to vote. Now, to enforce that requirement, Arizona does the logical thing. If you're registering to vote, like if you're going to go show up and fill out the form to get a ballot, and we recommend everybody in Arizona register to vote. If you're watching this and you're not sure if you're registered to vote, go register to vote. You have until October 7th to do it. It's going to be very tight here. And if you know somebody in your life that is not registered to vote, get them registered to vote. Please. This requirement or something similar, and make sure they vote, has been around for some form or fashion for at least 20 years. But for an equally long time, though, the federal courts have been chipping away at Arizona's critical protections. For example, in this case, the court held that under the National Voter Registration Act, Arizona cannot demand that those filling out a registration form, so they say, okay, there's a form that was a federal form, and Arizona had a state form, and they say, well, if you're asking Arizona citizens to fill out, or people in Arizona to fill out a form, you can't make an addendum to the federal form. You just have to give them the federal form. You can't change it. On still other occasions, parties have sought to use federal courts to silence Arizonans from even talking about the problem. Can't even talk about it. Arizona Democratic Party sues the Arizona Republican Party, rejecting claims that Trump campaign's descriptions of illegal aliens constituted intimidation, right? So if you even say illegal alien, looks like the Democrats will sue you, saying Trump is trying to intimidate illegal aliens, I guess. Now, this case threatens to continue chipping away Arizona's authority to secure their own elections. If we rewind the clock, in 2022, Arizona passed two bills, HB 2492 and 2243, to bolster its ability to make sure that only qualified individuals, aka citizens, could register to vote. Among other changes, the law restricted federal-only voters, okay, this is a classification of voters, that is, voters who had been unable to provide proof of citizenship to congressional elections, and not state or presidential elections. It also further barred them from voting by mail. So you don't get to have a mail-in ballot. It's just not something that happens because you're a non-citizen. And we're going to restrict what the state does to comply with your needs if you're not a citizen. Now, the district court held that the NVRA preempted those rules. So we have the supremacy clause. So they said, wait a minute, our standards, our requirements in order to get a ballot are different than yours, and we're the feds. And so our rules supersede your rules. And so Arizona now faces a higher chance now of non-citizens voting. But what happens in Arizona does not stay in Arizona, all right? Aliens who enter illegally at the southwest border go inside. And of course, there are non-citizens scattered throughout the rest of this country, where they're tourists, foreign exchange students, asylees, or others. Now, in all cases, they bring the threat of illegal voting with them. Recall again that Franken's pivotal votes in Minnesota or Obama's electoral votes in North Carolina changed the game. Thus, interior states like Kansas have tried to implement similar rules, but have also been stymied by U.S. election assistance commissions and other federal courts on the similar preemption grounds. The feds preempt the states. Now, still other states like West Virginia have considered additional laws and measures to address non-citizen voting, but those measures could well be defeated right out of the gate too. Now, us states, 24 of us, thus have an interest in seeing the federalization and the degradation of their election security stop already. Have our constitutional right to police our own elections vindicated. From another Supreme Court case in 2008, they say, there is no question about the legitimacy or the importance of states and their interest in counting only eligible votes. So we must be able to do that. If you read the NVRA to stop our common sense security measures for elections, like, our basic requiring documentary proof that they're a citizen to vote in some elections, that undermines that interest. Now, this right to police elections is a core component of our state sovereignty. It's fundamental to the definition of our national political community that foreign citizens do not have a constitutional right to participate in, and thus must be excluded from, activities of a democratic self-government. Thus, states as the sovereigns may reserve participation only to citizens of this country. And as sovereigns, each state has an obligation to preserve the basic conception of a political community. Now, the Constitution respects that sovereignty. It guarantees it, actually. Read the 10th Amendment and these other sections, including those governing presidential elections and more. It is therefore not something that Congress can take away from us. And so while the states support the applicants in full, Arizona, they focus here on the district court's decision, saying that the Fed law preempts, supersedes the Arizona law. That determination is a direct threat to Arizona and other states' ability to police their own voter fraud. It's erroneous, and the court should reverse the Ninth Circuit. Now, here's their argument. They say, look, all right, Supreme Court, this court should grant relief. Arizona has already set qualifications and registrations. The NVRA, the feds, can't change that. But even if this court disagrees, there are other reasons why the NVRA doesn't preempt the Arizona law. Let's talk about it. They say the district court made a mistake. They erroneously concluded that the federal law preempted Arizona. Of course, the feds trace their roots back to this provision of the law, but that decision is terrible and should be overruled anyways. On a practical level, the court's reading of that meant that Arizonans' ability to register to vote turns on whether they use a federal form. And the Alito says, we don't think that's what Congress had in mind when they wrote that. Now, reliance on agency action to address this is not a good cure. And this preemption analysis is dubious, saying that they have a basis to preempt the states. The history of voter registration and electoral regulation from the foundation of the government to our day is one of state regulation, okay? States govern their elections. With it, thus, is clearly established that the policy of Congress for so great a part of our life in our constitutional jurisprudence has been to leave the conduct of the election of its members to the state laws, leave it to the state officers, and that Congress will only regulate such elections by positive and clear statutes. Doesn't sound like preemption at all, in fact. So there's no warrant for treating an ambiguous law that's passed pursuant to the legislature's authority under the Elections Clause, right? In other words, the states are basing their power to make these changes in the Constitution. Then you can't just override that with some sort of federal statute. Now, at a minimum, the history of state control of election regulations generally, and voter registration more specifically, recognizes the broad scope of authority of the states. States have broad powers to determine the conditions on how voting works. It's quite unlikely that Congress meant to alter these when they passed the NVRA. The court should respect the states and their leading role in voter registrations and in creating and enforcing voter qualifications. They don't get to interpret the Elections Clause in the Constitution to undermine that. So, Supreme Court, you need to grant this application, please. And thus, find it likely that we're going to succeed. The court should do this at some point. Overrule that case. Or at least don't extend its reasoning, because the majority that decided that case was erroneous, and it's interpreting a rule that doesn't apply as their interpretation suggests. The latter point is sufficient to sustain our request. Under Arizona law, registration is itself a qualification. An elector shall not vote in election unless the elector has been registered to vote. Registration is both a means of enforcing the citizenship qualification, and it's a substantive requirement, and it's a necessary condition to exercise the right to vote. The state legislature has made it a requirement to vote. And that's in alignment with the Arizona Constitution. Now, the court has long said that the Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, which says each state shall appoint in a manner as the legislature thereof and may direct its electors. We presume it means what it says, that the appointment and the mode of the appointment of the electors belong exclusively to the states under the Constitution of the United States. Look at these Supreme Court cases from 1892 and also Bush versus Gore. Now, this was the problem in many ways in 2020, because what happened was the legislatures lost control, right? The executive branch stepped in there. They made private deals with third parties, and they usurped the power of the legislature. Now, to further illustrate the mischief that this case has engendered, the 10th Circuit has really garbled it as well. The line between procedural and substantive is blurry. This is a poor way for Congress to write statutes when it's all muddled up. And so we have to get rid of this fake interpretation. Procedural versus substantive differences. This is how we're going to interpret. Just get rid of it, okay? The whole thing is bad, and it's not interpreted appropriately, so the court should deal with it. Now, applying that authority to Arizona's law about this is simple. Under the Arizona law, the only people who may vote in a presidential election are those who provide documentation of citizenship when they registered to vote via the state form. Or if they're going to register via the federal form, then they have to have their citizenship verified. See, this is the closing the gap here that they really don't like. You verify it, right? Otherwise, they would just vote in federal-only elections. Nope, sorry. Thus, the Arizona legislature directed that the Arizona presidential electors will be selected by only those voters who have proven citizenship. The Constitution allows that. Now, against that, the lower level court said that there is only the federal law. But Congress enacted the federal law pursuant to its power under the Elections Clause to regulate the time, place, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives, not for the states. And did you notice how they separated that, right? So you could vote in the congressional stuff, but not the state or the presidential. Now, the ability, care, and fullness of the details that mark the drafting of the Constitution apply. Thus, the Election Clause's express reference to elections for senators and representatives limits it only to senators and representatives. So you can't talk about the other elections that the state is regulating here in Arizona, which is the state elections and the presidency. Going beyond the clause itself underscores the validity of that conclusion. To reiterate this, Supreme Court, the Constitution expressly provides for the selection of the presidential electors, which is located in Article 2. In contrast to that, the Electors Clause vests full authority in the states, not Congress, to appoint in such a manner as the legislature of that state sees fit the people they deem appropriate. Thus, Congress cannot use this to regulate presidential elections because they don't have the authority or the jurisdiction to do it. No precedent from this court says otherwise. This includes this case from 1934, on which the lower level court relied on. Now, that lower level case presumed that a law interfering with the power of the state to appoint presidential electors would be constitutionally questionable. And it thus stands for the principle that the federal government's interest in federal elections justifies federal law ensuring their integrity. But that's plainly correct. And it's equally plain that the federal government can protect that interest and ensure the integrity of presidential elections. That's true. Yeah, they have all of that. But in no way does that undermine the fact that the Electors Clause gives the states the power over it as well. So at its core, what the Constitution creates and what this court's precedent supports is a particular and mandated relationship. So what's the framework that's going to work here? Between federal and state responsibilities in the selection of the presidential electors. It requires a clear statement from Congress before a federal law can be read to alter it. A presidential election is not an ordinary election. The right to vote in a presidential election under Article 2 inheres not in citizens, but in states. That is, in a presidential election, the state is the voter. It follows that how a state exercises its right to vote is left to its discretion, right? Because that's how we distinguish. It's not a popular vote, right? So we're now basically putting all the votes into the bucket of the state, and the state gets to decide how the votes get into the state's bucket. Says, and as a corollary, federal laws governing voter registration do not limit the state's discretion. At the very least, they do not absent a clear statement from Congress that's intended to tee up this constitutional conflict. Interesting. Now, the NVRA, which rests on the Congress's power to regulate the time, place, and manner of elections, in no way provides that statement. And so they can't usurp our power unless they're intentionally stating they're usurping our power. To the contrary, in fact, the law's reliance on the Elections Clause strongly suggests the contrary. And so the lower level court made a big boo-boo. Also, the law does not preempt Arizona's sovereign right to regulate our own elections. That's right, baby. As the applicants note, these 24 states joining Arizona say that the district court's decision to invalidate Arizona's decision to limit mail-in voting to only citizens is also textually inexcusable. So Arizona said, no, I mean, unless you're a citizen, we're not going to mail you a ballot. Like, obviously not. So if you're prove you're a citizen, we'll mail you a ballot. Otherwise, no. After all, the NVRA says that the states retain the right to establish their own procedures, just like that, for registering to vote in 3 described ways. That's all Arizona has done, okay? And more to the point, NVRA concerns registering by mail, not voting by mail, all right? So this district court has just pulled this out of their booty. The overreach is particularly obvious for state elections as well. This section of the law bars mail-in voting for, quote, any election, which includes state elections in the absence of proof of citizenship. Stamps are expensive these days, okay? Biden's inflation has caused everything to be expensive. So we're not mailing, ballots to non-citizens, obviously. So the district court's order, however, is not confined to federal elections. In its summary judgment decision, the district court says, no, it's not just federal elections, it's all mail-in voting. The district court said, nope, you cannot limit voting by mail. If you're a non-citizen, you get ballots too. But that is incorrect. The framers of the Constitution intended that the states keep from themselves, as we know under the 10th Amendment, the power to regulate the elections. Now, the error from this lower court illustrates the federalism concerns that are inherent in any federal interference with state electoral laws. What happens when the federal government steps on the throat of the states? While the Constitution mandates that valid congressional acts are supreme, it is expedient and wise that the operations of the state and the national government should, as far as practicable, be conducted separately, right? The states, we have a parallel system, a federal system, in which there are undue jealousies and jars and conflicts that are avoided. And thus, congressional acts are presumed to have avoided unnecessary interference with states. The true interest of the people of this country requires that both the national and the state government should be allowed, without jealous interference on either side, to exercise all powers that belong to them. And Arizona has made a reasonable judgment here that there are special dangers of mail-in voting, and we want extra protection. But the district court ignored all that. A point its obstacle preemption analysis underscores. Obstacle preemption is a strong medicine to be very cautiously used. No more than in field preemption can the supremacy clause be deployed to elevate abstract, unenacted legislative desires above state law. From Gorsuch. The lower level court pointed to the NVRA and their findings as requirements for enactment of the federal law. And they do not preempt state law under the supremacy clause. Now, nothing justifies the district court's logic. There is no question about the legitimacy or importance of the state's interest in counting only the votes of eligible voters. To hold, as the district court did, that the federal court's purpose to increase voter turnout neuters the tools that Arizona put in place to do just that is precisely the vice of obstacle preemption, which the district court improperly invoked. And moreover, there will be irreparable harms to Arizona. If the Supreme Court does not grant relief here and allow us to regulate our own elections, Arizona will experience sovereign injuries that are all too familiar to the other 23 states and 24 states. The reason states have an interest in counting only the eligible voters are manifest, okay? For one, it's a decision that goes to the heart of representative government. Those interests are in no way attenuated because the district court's decision focuses on federal elections. In presidential elections, for example, the states are the voters, and Arizona, like every other state, is chosen to select its electors via a popular election. It has an interest in ensuring that the results of the election truly represent the will of the qualified voters, the citizens. Like the most important government officials, the states have the authority to determine the qualifications of their electors. And likewise, all these states have an interest in preventing voter fraud, including in congressional elections. It is well within the state's sovereign prerogatives to institute generally applicable and even-handed restrictions to protect the integrity and the reliability of the election. And equally in their interest, not to have those rules upended by some ambiguous federal laws under the guise of increasing the ease of voter registration. Now, that is especially true whereas in many cases the rules are enforced via criminal prohibitions. Now, the district court just simply ignored the state's sovereign power to create a code and enforce it. And so this court, the Supreme Court, has long held that any time a state is enjoined from or by a court from effectuating statutes that are enacted by its representatives, the people voted in Arizona to put these limitations in place, the court said no. It suffers a form of injury. That's us. And so in conclusion, 24 states, bunch of them, we'll list them out here, all join the application to the Supreme Court to request the stay of the injunction stopping the voting protections from coming into place. So we got a bunch of AGs here. We got Alabama, Alaska's in the house, Arkansas, Florida, what's up, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Indiana's here, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina. We got South Dakota, Texas, Utah, and Virginia all joining in. Of course, Arizona's attorney general is just the worst, and so she would never do anything like that because she loves illegals voting. and she can't wait for them to come and vote in this election again. So that is what's happening. Here is what the docket looks like over from the Supreme Court. So this has been submitted to Justice Kagan. We've got a bunch of different briefs also submitted. The Arizona Republican Party jumped in on this. The Immigration Reform Law Institute jumped in. We've got the United States responded to this. Adrian Fontes from Arizona. Oh, great. He's going to be responding to this. The DNC's joining, the Democratic National Party. They love illegal immigrants voting, aliens voting, and they're very excited about it. So they all want to make sure that they get their say over in the Supreme Court of the United States. We'll see if they accept this case and what they do about it. But the battle is ahead. All right, and so we'll keep our eye on that one, my friends. Thank you for subscribing wherever you're watching this. We really greatly appreciate that. We'd love to see you back here. But we are going to change gears a little bit because now we're talking about what's going on with Walz. Timothy Walz, you know him. He's the new vice presidential nominee. Timothy Walz is being shredded over his DUI lies. Even people in the media are calling him out on it, saying, no, it wasn't a hearing problem. Dude was going very fast while very intoxicated. James Comer is also sending a letter to the FBI asking for answers about Walz's connection to China. You can see this letter came from Comer. He's drafting this one from the Committee on the Oversight and Accountability. Comer from Kentucky sent this one to the Honorable Christopher Wray, August 16th, signed by Comer himself, Chairman, Oversight and Accountability Committee. He says, all right, listen, we got to know a little bit more about Tim Walz, this CCP dude. He says, the Committee on Oversight and Accountability is conducting a government-wide investigation into the CCP, all right? First of all, they've got political warfare operations against America. We want to know how federal agencies are responding. And speaking of CCP people, Kamala recently announced her running mate, Timothy Walz, the current governor of Minnesota. And as part of the committee's government-wide investigation, we and the FBI were briefed on April 22nd, 2024, and again on July 17. And during that time, FBI briefers told the committee and the Bureau's Foreign Influence Task Force investigates exactly the exact kind of activity that has come to light about Governor Walz. Now, the committee is seeking information about the Chinese entities and officials Governor Walz has engaged and partnered with, and we want to know about any warnings or advice the FBI may have given to Walz and about U.S. political figures being targeted or recruited by CCP. Now, it has come to the committee's attention, FBI, that Governor Walz has long-standing connections to CCP-connected entities and officials that make him susceptible to the party's strategy of elite capture, which seeks to co-opt influential figures in elite political, cultural, and academic circles to influence the U.S. to benefit the communist regime and to the detriment of Americans. Now, reporting about Governor Walz's extensive engagement with the CCP officials and entities while serving in public office raises questions about possible influence from the CCP and his decision-making as governor, and should he be elected as the vice president. Now, recent reporting, writes Comer, reveals that Governor Walz has concerning ties to the PRC. In 1993, according to the Star-Herald, as a teacher, Mr. Walz organized a trip to the PRC for Alliance high school students, where costs were paid by the Chinese government. Now, in 1994, Mr. Walz set up a private company named Education Travel Adventures, which coordinated annual trips to the PRC until 2003. It was led by Mr. Walz himself. Now, the corporation was reportedly dissolved 4 days after he took congressional office. Interesting, according to business records, as you can see in the footnotes. Now, since his first trip to China, Governor Walz has visited the PRC 30 times. In its investigation, the committee has highlighted the importance of U.S. officials being cognizant of CCP political and psychological warfare and efforts that seek to undermine and threaten national security. Now, while serving in Congress, Walz also served as a fellow at the Macau Polytechnic University while in Congress. a Chinese institution that characterizes itself as having a long-held devotion to and love for the motherland, just like good communists do. At the time he disclosed serving as a Macau fellow, Mr. Walz also had significant credit card debt. Oh, financial disclosure statement. Oh, isn't that curious? In 2019, Governor Walz headlined the 27th National Convention for the U.S.-China People's Friendly Association in the state of Minnesota. He also spoke alongside the president of the China's People Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries. Man, they have long names too. Gosh. Why do all bureaucrats and communists do this? It's long titles. Although, you know, that one's not that bad. I mean, that one's kind of complicated. The other ones that are worse are like, you know, assistant deputy director in charge, special assistant director in charge of the directors. The hell what do you do? A year later, the Department of State exposed as a Beijing-based organization tasked with co-opting subnational governments. That's nice. So he was hanging out. They call it Association of Friendship with Foreign Countries, which means we're going to co-opt and take you over into our dictatorship, including efforts to directly and malignly influence state and local leaders to promote the PRC's global agenda. That's nice. So Governor Walz has admitted that he does not fall into the category that China necessarily needs to be an adversarial relationship. And I don't know that that is that big of a problem, to be honest with you. It's like, okay, well, you know, it'd be nice that it's not that adversarial because we just are so much more competent. You know what I'm saying? No, it's like you don't have to fight with your younger brother. It's like it's not really an adversarial relationship because you can just kind of take your younger brother always, you know. Talking to you, Joe, punk. So, you know what I'm saying? You can, bigger brother always wins. So that's kind of the thing. It's like, hey, you know, okay, whatever, China. Okay, we're not going to, no, it doesn't need to be adversarial. We don't even think about you. In fact, the Chinese did this when they were talking about the UK. There was that brutal clip of that Chinese guy. He's like, we don't even think about you guys. We're not adversarial with the UK. What are you talking about? We're like, what are you doing? He said that. It was like, whoa, that was brutal. But it's the same concept. But I also don't know if that's what he means by that, right? He might mean that the United States is like the little brother to China, which is the concern. Despite bipartisan efforts to identify and defeat CCP, unrestricted warfare against America, Governor Walz continues problematic engagement with entities and individuals. In fact, in March 2024, not that long ago, he met with Consul General Zhao Jian to discuss China-U.S. relations and subnational cooperation. Now, despite his knowledge and condemnation of Communist China's human rights violations, Governor Walz says he applauds the accomplishments of the Chinese people and recognizes that some in the Chinese government advocate for greater rule of law. All right. Now, to assist with the committee's investigation into the CCP infiltration and influence operations and the response from federal agencies, here's what we want. All documents and comms in the FBI's possessions, including that of foreign influence task forces regarding any Chinese individual or entity with whom Walz may have engaged or partnered. So we want to know about all these. Chinese People's Association of Friendship with Foreign Countries, which is, you know, not about friendship at all. It's just like how the Patriot Act is about patriotism and how the Inflation Reduction Act is about reducing inflation. Chinese Students and Scholars Associations, Confucius Institutes, Consul General Zhao Jian, Embassy from the PRC, the Macau Polytechnic University, the Ministry of Public Security, Ministry of State Security, man, a lot of Chinese ties, National Association for China's Peaceful Unification, the PRC, consulates in the U.S., the United Front, including the United Front Work Department, U.S.-China People's Friendship Association, and the U.S.-China Heartland Association. We want all documents between Walz and anything pertaining to warnings or guidance you may have given him. Here are the instructions for how you can get us these materials. Please send them over to our office. We're Congress. We can investigate any matter at any time, and we're doing that now. Thanks for your prompt attention to this matter. Sincerely, your friend, James Comer. All right. So that went over to Walz, and it makes sense now. Kamala's father was a communist. This guy loves the communists, and Kamala's a communist. She's got price communism coming down and more. So we'll continue to monitor it. But Tim Walz is also under a lot of other scrutiny. This was CNN, clipped for us over from our friend Johnny Maga on X. says that Timothy Walz got fact check about his DUI. And we already have done this. We read through the entire police report, if you recall here. Look that up on our channel if you missed that. But we went through the entire PDF of what happened when it originally happened. And then we listened to him and come out and say, well, it was a hearing. His campaign said it was a hearing loss and all this stuff. And no, that's not true at all. So here's a fact check from CNN. What's going on here?
DUI arrest. This is a story about someone getting a DUI arrest and then his campaign repeatedly misleading and giving false statements to the public about it. So let's just go to the facts of that 1995 arrest first, okay? Walz was speeding over 95 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. He failed a field sobriety test that was administered by a state trooper. He then admitted in court that he had been drinking. He was transported to a local hospital for a blood test that showed he had a blood alcohol level of 0.128, and that was above the state legal limit. He then took a plea deal where he pled guilty to a reckless driving charge. Now, those are the facts. That's from police records. That's from court records. And that all is completely undisputed.
All right. So that is clear. The idea of what happened. What did his congressional campaign actually say happened?
So let's fast forward to 2006. He's in a tight congressional race. He is running for Congress. This was a Republican-held district that he was trying to flip. And then a local Republican blog puts up that he had this arrest for drunk driving. Now, I'm going to give you sort of the bullets of what his campaign said about that. The campaign citing Walz claimed that he had not been drinking and driving. They attributed his...
Whoa! That's a lie. Oh, whoa.
His failed field sobriety test to hearing loss from his time in the National Guard, not alcohol. The campaign falsely said that he drove himself to the station, that he was allowed to drive home. They said the DUI charges were dropped because they were unfounded. And the campaign even faulted this trooper for saying that he didn't realize that Walz had hearing impairment. They claimed a judge actually chastised the state trooper for it. Now take a look at just one statement that his campaign put out. They said he, quote, couldn't understand what the trooper was telling him during the field sobriety test, and the trooper refused to speak up. The DUI charges were dropped for a reason. The judge would not have dismissed them if there were anything to him. Tim drove to the station.
That is such a scam. Okay, we read through it. He took a reduced plea, like they amended the charge back down to a reckless driving. He got a smoking deal on it, and he was out of there. They wrapped it up, but
that night and drove home afterwards. I don't think the trooper would have allowed that if there had been a problem. So none of what they said in that 2006 race was true at all, as we saw in just looking at those details of the 1995 arrest.
Your reporting sort of points out this is
yeah, so they lied massively in the first campaign, and he still won. He still won. Nobody even was apparently fact-checking it. So that was on CNN, which was very curious. They also brought this guy out, too. So Ian Miles Chong is the one who clipped this for us, and he is explaining that this happened. Michael Smerconish, political commentator, was on here, also talking about this DUI. Very interesting.
Walz spoke sloppily, should not have represented a role that he had as having been a permanent role when it wasn't. But the DUI story is indefensible. Yeah. Casey, you and I know a thing or two about congressional campaigns. They're very small. They're very tight. There's usually like a paid campaign manager and a paid spokesperson, and that's it. So the idea that this came from his spokesperson and it didn't come from him, I don't buy it. Totally. And the idea that he tried to lay it off on a hearing disability from the National Guard service.
Sick, right? That's sick. Talk about stolen valor. He's like, oh yeah, I was like shooting artillery in Italy. And that's why I couldn't hear, because I was fighting for war, fighting in war for this country. And the DUI was dismissed. Sick, man.
Through the spokesperson, while denying things that the K-file investigation proved to be inaccurate, I think is a real issue for him. In the end, it's going to be about the top of the ticket. But to me, the DUI is bigger than the stolen valor allegation. Not because of the drinking, but because of the lie.
How do you think the Harris campaign should be dealing with this right now?
Full on. And it makes me wonder whether in the vetting process, maybe this is as a result of the expedited nature of her ascendancy as the candidate, but it makes me wonder how much they really knew about it. I'm sure they knew of the WI, but it makes me wonder whether they were aware of all the underlying facts to the extent that the K file is.
No, I don't think. Well, maybe they were. I don't know that they realized that the guy was probably as big of a liar as he is, and he just kind of fibs and makes stuff up and allows people to think what they want to think. But it is a big issue, and the fact that he's laying on his National Guard stuff to say that that was a hearing problem when he was actually just drunk and speeding shows that it's a crack in the facade that means one portion will fall off and we'll start to see the other lies for what they are. Now, Kamala, the woman who picked that guy and thought he was amazing, she was out and very curious today. She was making all sorts of admissions about better economic times when Trump was in charge.
As president, I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans.
Created?
Like the cost of food.
Which has gone up under you guys
we all know
a lot.
That prices went up during the pandemic when the supply chains shut down and failed.
And when you signed that Inflation Reduction Act.
But our supply chains
have
now improved. And prices are still too high.
Yeah, but you're still spending. That's the problem.
A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%.
Thanks to you. So we saw that that is all true, and she's responsible for that. And so End Wokeness has created the shortest political ad of all time. Here's what that sounded like.
A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Boom. That's it. 15 seconds. All you need. On repeat. That's Donald Trump. I approve this message. Absolutely outstanding. So that is what's happening with Walz and Kamala. And they're also saying that her little communist agenda is not good. Setting price caps has failed every time it's tried. Everybody and every country that's experimented with that has experienced catastrophe. And in some cases, 100 million dead. But here is CNN having a conversation about this.
Catherine, I read your piece and I heard you just mention it. The federal ban on price gouging for groceries. You are skeptical of this. Why?
Well, first of all, nobody can explain what price gouging means. It's like that old line about pornography. I know it when I see it. In the sense that what does it mean to have an excessive price or an excessive profit margin? That seems to be shorthand for a price or a profit margin that bugs me. That seems too high. Yeah. So, it's very hard to pin down what this would actually mean. If you look at the legislation that, as I mentioned, is already in the Senate, led by Senate Warren and Senator Bob Casey and a slew of others, the particular way that this is written, which is likely to be the template for any proposal that Harris would eventually embrace, is especially bad in that it just bans excessive prices, grossly excessive profit margins, and says that the Federal Trade Commission can use any metric it deems appropriate to decide what that would mean. Which basically says, like, it's not going to be markets, it's not going to be supply and demand that's determining how much your grocery store charges you for milk or for eggs. It's going to be some bureaucrat in D.C., which seems like totally unworkable, first of all, for the FTC to be deciding, like, how much Kroger charges for eggs in Michigan. But it also would be very bad for markets. We've seen this kind of thing tried in lots of other countries before: Venezuela, Argentina, the Soviet Union, etc. It leads to shortages. It leads to black markets. Plenty of uncertainty. And beyond that, the specific way this bill is written might actually increase prices because of some of the other language in it. Things like requiring public companies to disclose in their quarterly reports, their quarterly earnings reports, how they're setting prices, which is a great way to help them collude, which normally we don't want them to do. So anyway, the devil's in the details, I guess, for that bill, but it's really hard for me to imagine any form of legislation that preserves the spirit of what she's proposing, that would not be, at best do nothing, at worst cause a lot of harm.
Yeah, and starvation and shortages and black markets and all the things that good communists love because they want total control of the entire apparatus, the entire country. So that was a great article. She wrote it. We read through it for our membos, with our membos this morning. We had a great membos only stream. Thanks for becoming a membo. If you just became a membo, check out the morning stream. And so, my friends, let's see what you say about all of this and more. It's a beautiful Friday. I see some great comments have come in. I see some great donos. Thank you so much for these. And then when we're done here, we're going to go over to locals for our members only after party. And membos, if you're a membo, we also do Saturday streams for our membos. And so we'll see you tomorrow for that membo stream. Let's see what's cooking over on locals and on the tubes, my friends. Thank you for sending these donos in. You guys rock. What's up? NY Renals in the house says Kamala at her North Carolina speech said price gagging, which she's got, experience with. What's up? Brett Hathaway became a supporter. Thanks, Brett. Great to have you here. Grab that members only stream from this morning. We talked about some good stuff today, and we'll see you tomorrow. We got this one from Voice of the People's here. Says, I might have had a hand in the Alabama election thing. I had a talk with Governor Ivey a few times about the Secret Service site, Social Security Administration site showing irregularities on the have numbers. 25% didn't match SSN and the last name. Wow, that's awesome, Voice. That's what we're talking about, baby. That's some representative government in action. We're glad he's taking some action. Thanks for talking to him about it. It's good, right? We the people can do stuff. It's amazing. We got NY says, these immigrant groups should be charged with federal RICO charges for supporting illegal immigration. I don't think that's a bad idea. If they're facilitating, through a conspiracy and exploitation of American laws, yeah, I'd agree too. Just like anything else. Just like theft of services, right? Stealing other items from the government. There's plenty of basis for it. But the problem is there's no prosecutors willing to do it. What's up? Object Class Keeter says, voting is not a right. It's a privilege for citizens. From Object Class Keeter. Good to see you. We got King Ginger says, remember Biden said that they put together the most inclusive voter fraud organization in U.S. history? And they did the same thing for Obama. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and people say that was just a slip, right? Oh, no, he meant voter turnout. But no, we know, even if it was a Freudian slip, that it was the truth. They did. They put together a major voter fraud organization. And they suppressed a ton of votes, legitimate votes, which is fraudulent. And they increased, I think, a bunch of other fraudulent votes. We saw that at length with signature waivers and all the other stuff. Bonnie, what's up? It is said that they cross-reference the voters with the green card holders. What about the illegals and other non-citizen immigrants who don't have green cards and registration numbers to cross-reference to? Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so they're just comparing a list, but what if there's just other people? Like, that's always been my question too. Like, are they validating the numbers? Right? Like honestly, are they validating the numbers? Are they comparing and contrasting? So I read another thread. I think it was from Liz Harrington. Shout out to Liz Harrington. I think she posted a good thread on this, where she was talking about the numbers that they were using were Social Security or the ITIN numbers, which are the basically, illegal numbers. So, and they were sending them through the SSA, through the Social Security Administration, because the Social Security Administration doesn't do citizenship checks, right? So like, who's validating this stuff, in other words? And are they validating citizenship? They could fill out a form, but it could be going to a federal government that doesn't actually validate it. I think her point was the Secret Service doesn't do any citizenship type validation. They just presume that the numbers coming across have already been checked at some point. So right, it's all that little stuff. It's all the squeaky little stuff that they know how it works, and they keep it purposely opaque so we don't. It'd be very simple. Just you have to be a citizen. That's all. And sure, we can put the gate at the registration point. You got to be a citizen to get past the gate. Sheila the Pooh, what's up? 1,000,000 hugs to you. 10 membos. Sheila, you rock. Good to have you. Thanks for being a membo and bringing in more membos. Brian Couchman in the house. Zancy Pelosi. What day is it? Is here. Andrea Murray. Brad Thorne. What's up? Scott Cohen. Rabbit Sticks here. Stephen Kidgel. Robin Mattingly. Welcome. Andrea Palin. And some shout outs from Jennifer, Janine, Zancy, Bill Street saying Sheila in the house. Big biceps for Sheila in the house. Good to see you. Thank you, Sheila, for bringing new membos in. Very nice to have you. Now, did I do over here? Okay, Rob, got to be careful with what your windows are doing. Very squirrely today. Getting a little antsy. What's up? Object Class Keeter says, technically voting for traitors and felons is not new to the U.S. The first few POTUS were along with reps and senators. Not like they rebelled or anything. I think I see what you're saying. Like, all of our founders were felons because they betrayed the British crown, kind of a thing. Not like they rebelled or anything, kind of a thing. Hey, what's up? Just Rhonda says, Rob, these are some of the emojis I made. You said I only sent you a little picture of them, but you need to download them. They are in the proper format for YouTube emojis. Oh, those look like good ones. If it's the exact same size I use on my channel, if they need to be adjusted, just let me know. I can adjust them for you. Now, these are in 40 by 40, so just everyone can see them better. In the email, they're 48 by 48. Man, those are good emojis. Okay, I'm going to look at that this weekend. Just Rhonda, you rock. Thank you for sending those. Those would be good ones. Those would be good ones to add to our chat. Woo! Actually, they're right here, I think. Yeah, there they are. But can I add them if they're not moving? Can I add them if they're not GIFs? Will they take PNGs? Okay, we're gonna try it. We're gonna try it out tomorrow. Hey, what's up? Voice of the people in the house. We've got, who is this fella? He's saying the voice of the people should be heard. He's right. I don't know who that is though. Hey, what's up, voice? Thanks for bringing in 10 new membos, brother. We got Voice of the People, who does off-label podcasts right next door on all the tubes. Bringing in Tim Michaels. What's up? Welcome, Tim. Susan Danielle, welcome. Michelle got one. Brett DePace. We have Shane Souza, Sergeant Grinch, Joyce C. JD, Melissa Larson, Ray J, Eddie Clay, and more shout-outs for Voice of the People for bringing in 10 of our newest of membos. Hey, Ray K, what's up? Says, in Australia, all citizens by law have to vote. I don't agree with that. I wonder what would happen if it was that way in the United States. Uninformed voters. Yeah, uninformed voters, I think. Yeah, I mean, a lot of like low information voters. Do you think it forces people to have a more civic understanding? More civic involvement, engagement? I don't know. How is it? How does it work over there? I've heard other ideas like making it a federal holiday and stuff like that to increase turnout, but I think people, we should have some civic virtue in this country. Like, it should be part of our upbringing that you have an obligation to, maintain a functional society around us. Like, you have to be engaged in, and that probably sounds self-serving because we are like political junkies here. But if more people, I think, had a little bit more understanding about how things worked and the mechanics of everything, I would hope our society would actually be more representative. I think it's representative of few because, first of all, our House of Representatives has been needlessly shrunken illegally, unconstitutionally. But we'd have more representation. We'd have more people engaged. Our politicians would be able to get away with less because more people would be putting pressure on them. Our citizens would be more unified in pushing back against the federal government, really, is what I'm hopeful for. But who knows if that would happen. DJ, what's up? In Michigan, we have to show our driver's license, which we have to bring in our birth certificate to them. They put a seal on it for everyone to see. To vote? Well, that sounds pretty good. What's up? Via's Never Silent says, boiling it down to a few, they choose, and if states wants to rebel against the state votes, a few in power will say something about that. J6 U.S. Todd electors, this is the plan. NY says, I keep saying Dems cheat at Monopoly. A big portion of their on-the-book platform is to continue to aid in voter fraud. Says, the Chinese call us names. Okay, Knox says, TGIF all, sharing this from the dossier. Why does this not surprise me? What's going on? We got this one from Sheila the Pooh. 1,000,000 hugs to you. Thank you, Sheila. Says that the Brian K. Reinhardt is a new member. What's up, Sheila the Pooh? Thanks for bringing this one in. From Brian K. Reinhardt. Grandma's in the house. Eternal Damned in the house. Roberto Ortiz. Cool Frog's here. Not your average golden potato. Freya's here. What's up, James Hicks? White Rabbit. Mia Tamama in the house. Craig P. And more shout outs for Sheila Pooh. 1,000,000 hugs to you for bringing in all the newest of members. You're awesome. Thank you for doing that. And welcome, new members. Welcome. Hey, what's up? Voice of the People says Trump just hired Tulsi to advise before the Harris debate. If true, I'm all in for the debate then. Yeah, I saw that headline. Yeah, and this is a great comment, Brad. I was just going to say that. Remember, Tulsi obliterated Harris. We played that for Membos this morning. We played that clip of Tulsi. Like, remember when you had 1,500 people in prison for marijuana offenses, but you were smoking weed? Remember that? Or when you were keeping them in custody so you could exploit them for cheap labor? Yeah. Hey, Jack Mack, what's up? Says, if Walz had hearing impairment in the 90s, I don't think he could have served in the military at all for the better part of 25 years. Maybe I'm wrong about that, though. Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know, where did that hearing problem come from? Like, again, if it was in the 90s, had he been deployed to Iraq, in Italy, shooting artillery? Or did his ears get blown out from practicing artillery with the National Guard? And if his ears got blown out, then how did that happen? All right, like, why did his ears get blown out at a training base? All right, this old guy says, wow, so somebody injected Walz with alcohol before the blood test? Even Biden said, come on, man. Yeah, it's a campaign lie, and it's sick. What's going on, Chubby says, come on, we all know he has hearing loss from his time in Italy. You know, it gets loud out there in Italy. That's true. There's a lot of tourists and stuff, people shouting and all the time. Those Italians screaming at each other. Go to an Italian restaurant, they're all screaming. It was a result of repeated exposure to those pesky, noisy mimes that plague the country. NY says, she mispronounced price gauging or gouging. So she called it gagging. You know, Kamala knows about that. She knows a lot about price gagging. What's up, Denise? Just Denise says, please hit the like button for the loving truth, chat. Thank you, Denise. Yeah, for loving the truth, chat. Thank you for that, Denise, just Denise. And thank you, my friends, for liking this wherever you're watching it. One old guy's opinions says, Kamala says this, I know Joe, myself, and Democratic Congress members have caused all the inflation. Give us a chance to F this up some more. Don't worry. We have fixed this election too, from one old guy's opinions. Yeah, Trump had a good line on this yesterday. He said, day one, what is she talking about? It's like day 1300, okay? She's been in the office for 3.5 years. Day one, give me a break. Chubby says on Locals, so basically the Harris campaign strategy is to directly mimic the Trump campaign. Yeah, I think that's exactly, so you're going to give us the list. She stole the no tax on tips, though to be fair, Trump is targeting hospitality workers and Harris hospitality. And now, a day after Trump does a press conference where he compares everyday food prices, she does the same thing. How can people not be turned off by this, quote, strategy? And I think the same thing with child tax credits too, right? Like J.D. Vance comes out and says, we'll give you a $5,000 tax credit if you have a kid. She comes out, I think, and said 6. Is that right? It's like they steal everything. They're Democrats. Sheila Poo says prices are up because the government under JB, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris overspent, stopped drilling, and drove inflation through the roof. Yeah, and I think it's the spending too. Yeah, the spending, which you mentioned. Yeah. And they didn't need to, like that whole second tranche of money. I think Inflation Reduction was, I've called it like 1.2 trillion, but it's not. I think it's like 800 billion rather. But the numbers, that was in addition to all the other COVID spending. I mean, it was crazy. NY says, I have a great idea for a Trump ad. Remember how the Biden administration dealt with the baby formula shortage in 2021? Remember that? Get ready for more shortages, because instead of fostering production, the Biden administration put more barriers in place and bungled that crisis. Ray Ronk says, Walz is a criminal. UCMG Article 107 and 10 U.S. Code 107 says making false statements and oaths. It depends on the prosecution filing charges, though. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I'm sure. Look, I'm sure if you put Fannie Willis, the opposite of Fannie Willis in charge, they could find, what is the opposite of Fannie Willis? Like a good prosecutor, I guess. Like a terrible prosecutor to a good prosecutor. My point is, if you could find something to charge him with. I'm sure. Based on all of the clips we've seen and all of it, I guess a good compare and contrast would be to see who else has been charged for stolen valor. Although maybe not, right? Because the Supreme Court just came out and said that a lot of that was free speech. So I think that's in that gray area. That's right. It is in that gray area. Bonnie says, Canada tried price controls. By 1978, the effects of wage and price controls, although not definitive, were viewed as a failure and were phased out. Within a year, the Anti-Inflation Board was dissolved. The program was generally disliked by Canadians, and the government intrusion into the free market economy had many unforeseen results, which created more difficulties and were solved by the program. Yeah. But Kamala Harris's voters don't know that, and they don't care. They just like when she says, we're going to lower your groceries. And they go, yeah, groceries. Thank you, Bonnie. One old guy's opinion says, how to fix the economy. And the Federal Reserve Bank return to the gold standard, allow taxes to be paid with gold or gold-backed currency. And it sounds like what you're talking about is a sound currency, right? Something that is not being inflated into oblivion by our useless bureaucrats. John Butner, what's up, John? Says, I'd like to see people parking near polling places with a big sign on their vehicle that says voting by non-citizens is punishable by deportation. Yeah, it's a nice idea. I'd be careful about that. I bet some prosecutor would punish you for that in some jurisdiction, right? There's all sorts of laws about that, so be very cautious about that idea. It sounds, just like a nice public service announcement, but somebody will hit you with voter intimidation somewhere. Fannie Willis be salivating over that. Good to see you, John. Alice Elizabeth says, going to the abandoned Biden rally in Chicago and then protesting the DNC convention, plus the uncommitted delegates are going to protest inside. That'll learn them about not having a primary. We support peaceful protesters at the DNC convention. It's their time to make their voices heard. It's going to be the last time to make their voices heard. The nomination is going to be happening there. They deserve to have a candidate that is representative of them. They did not have that opportunity up until this moment. There was no opportunity to vote for her. Well, there was an opportunity, but they voted for Biden. And then they threw them out. So I guess this is the final opportunity for all Democrats who are disaffected, no matter what side they're on, whether they're Palestinians or, pro-Israel or whatever. As long as they're there peacefully protesting, peacefully assembling, we'll be supporting them. And I hope there's a lot of them. Hey, what's up? Jennifer says, Business Party Podcast on Rumble is tonight. In 1 hour, please come join us. That sounds great. Business Party Podcast. Sounds like a good one. Check it out, Jennifer. Search that one up, my friends, and make sure you go over there. This old guy says, some of us here remember waiting in long lines for gasoline, 1973, 1974, during the Arab oil embargo. The lines weren't the result of the embargo. They were the result of the unreasonably low prices set by the U.S. Cost of Living Council, which caused the scarcity of gas availability. One thing I can say for us is that we never seem to learn. Yeah, and that's the Nixon stuff, right? And we were talking about that this morning on Locals. And yeah, it sounds terrible. So imagine that with your food, right? Big problem. Hey, what's up? Tony DeMarco shared this one. Says, Walz looks like a complete communist in his mugshot, or Elmer Fudd. Yeah, he kind of does have that little Mao look going, doesn't he? Yeah, that's when he was hard of hearing and definitely not drunk. Hey, what's up? One old guy's opinion says, no balls, Wall, Marky Marxist. That's whack. For sure. What's up, Ollie? In the house, bringing in one membo called Anacism is here. Welcome aboard. Thank you, Ollie, for being a membo. Bringing in a new membo. Much love to you. We got this one from Stacy Milliken. What's up, Stacy? Thanks for being a membo. Saying, thanks for what you do. My YouTube friend Dave the lawyer found you because of me, and he's excited. Thank you for the new friends I have. TGIF. Hey, Stacy, what a great comment. Thanks for coming and being a part of what we're doing here, a part of our community. We're glad that you're here. And shout out to Dave the lawyer. What's up, Dave the lawyer? Good to have you here too, brother. So yeah, thanks for this. We got some great new friends. You're among some amazing people. The best, quite frankly. The best. Hey, Jack Mack is here. Jack Mack gifted one membo, just one. She says, I'm pinching penny today's, Rob. Inflation and all. Don't know budget exhausted for August 24th. Thank you, Jack. Shane Souza says, the chat thanks you. We salute you, Jack Mack. Thanks for that. Times are tight, baby. I totally understand it. Totally understand it. So I get it. But thank you, Jack. Thanks for digging deep and bringing in at least one new membo. Pamela G. You got it. Welcome aboard. One old guy's opinions. Gas lines were Carter. Was that Carter? Yeah, that was Carter, wasn't it? I think I got my dates wrong. One old guy's opinion says how to fix the economy. Return to quality making commodities. Cars, steel, oil, natural gas, computer chips. Yeah, I think making goods and services would be a good idea. And building infrastructure in the United States so we don't have to rely on foreign entities like Taiwan to make our chips. Although that's happening. I mean, we're building some cool stuff in Arizona right now, which is cool. Hey, John Allen. What's up, John Allen? It's great to see you. It's been a little while. Thanks for the nice dono. Good to see you on the locals. What's going on? Hey, Rob and all the watchers. Been super busy lately, but as always, keeping up with the streams. Thanks, John. I think by now we have quintuplets, maybe even more, because it's been a long time. She's how many babies since spring of 2020? Hard to count the math on that. As always, your streams have been awesome. You continue to help so many people every day. Thank you, John. You're a good man. Thanks, John. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Keep up the good work, my friend. John! So sweet, brother. Good to see you, man. I know things are busy, but I'm glad that you're able to pop by when you can pop by. Really glad to have you for all these years. We've been through some serious business, and it's nice to have you here, John. Thanks for that. Hope you're doing well, brother. Glad you were able to make it by today. Jack Mack was here. It's great to see you, Jack. And my friends, those are the great donos. Thank you so much for sending those in on this lovely Friday. Some amazing comments, and we're grateful for them. Let's see who's joining us on X. It was Carter, says Knox. Yeah, it was Carter. Says, I had just gotten my driver's license. We had to go on the day corresponding with our last name. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. Now do that with bread. It's going to be a big problem. All right, let's see who's joining us on X. Do we have any comments? James Pepper, what's going on? All right, Fred Pedamonte says, here are some of the Ninth Circuit judges appointed by. Interesting. From Fred. Good to see you, Fred. What's up, James? Massive data breach yesterday. All of our social security numbers are gone. Chinese hackers, somebody's got them. George says, the sniper that actually took the final shot was from this location, not the other location. I think some people were thinking it was from this location. Some people were thinking, yeah, you think it was right here. That's the final kill shot? Yeah, interesting. Thanks, George. Good stuff. Okay, so my friends, those are some comments over on X. If you're on X, give us a follow. Give your fellow watchers a follow so that you can connect out there in the wild on the X platform. But all right, my friends, that is going to be it for us on the day. We want to thank all of our amazing mods who mod the fort down for us and keep things oh so nice and beautiful and orderly in the chat every single day, including K-Bean, Just Cause, Playin' Hooky, our friend Ronnie Cole, Zach Nichols, Janek, Dog Digger, Economy Pilot, Donut Mind Me, Carrie B. Zulu, and we saw John Allen today, who swung on by for a bet. It's great to see everybody. Thank you, mods, for modding the fort down for us, keeping things nice and orderly. My friends, it has been a heck of a week. Tomorrow, it's going to be DNC fever. They're going to be just all over themselves next week. Oh, it's going to be disgusting. But we're going to be here covering the important topics of the day, seeing what's happening all around us as we continue to watch the watchers. And we're grateful to be able to go through that with you together. Thank you so much for joining us this day, this week. We're going to leave it there for the weekend and unplug from politics for just a little bit, kind of, so that we can recharge our energy tanks, rejuvenate our souls, and restore our spirits. Because we're going to come back here on Monday to get into it all again. And in order to do that, we're going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night and an amazing weekend, my friends. I'll see you right back here on Monday. Bye-bye.